That sweet, sweet sound, that crackling of pure, uncontrollable energy, chaos incarnate, the lightning bolt. Get ready for the best builds that Leigong has to offer. Greetings Internet, DDA here, and to kick off this build guide video, before we get started, as just a point of open discussion, I just wanted to do a quick tier list of Leigong's abilities, just so we can understand how, what kind of a scaling of his abilities are. Like, what are the abilities that we want to focus and build around, and what are the snap abilities that we want to grab. Like, if we see a master or an expert rank of these certain abilities for him, what are the ones that we're going to want to grab immediately? We're going to spend a lot of time talking about these abilities, so I don't want to spend too much time debating over whether something is S tier or A tier. But this is just my opinion. So starting out here with Chain Lightning. Chain Lightning is actually Leigong's best ability. It hits like a freight train. Does probably the most damage in the entire game. Has strong out of all blessings. Has strong single target damage and strong AoE damage as well. And if you get it master rank, it has about a 27% chance to trigger without any plus luck. So meaning that, it's pretty easy to get plus 100% luck if you build luck into your build and you run and get some shrines throughout the game. So it's pretty easy to make this a 50% chance or higher to trigger. So very, very strong. Like I said, it's his best ability, so it's definitely going to go in S tier. And it's going to be pretty much cornerstone to most of the builds that we're going to discuss with Leigong. Next up here, we have his melee augment, which is Wrathful Strike. Wrathful Strike is okay. To be honest with you, it's kind of mid. It's mediocre. It is probably one of the weaker melee augments in the game. The extra melee attack has a really low chance to trigger, and unless you are heavily leaning on luck and have a ton of luck, it's just a really low chance to trigger. Plus, it has the lowest flat damage of any melee augment in the game. So because of that, we're going to put it into C tier for his abilities. Not a very strong ability, and you're going to see throughout when we discuss his guides, we often don't take that ability. Next up here, we have Lightning Orbs. Lightning Orbs are pretty good. They offer strong damage when you build into them heavily. If you get a high master rank, like if you compare to Chain Lightning can actually do a lot of damage, even only being adept or expert. But Lightning Orbs really need to get a upper rank to lower their cooldown and increase their damage. They have strong AoE damage, but their single target damage is lacking. And because, Leigong has options for AoE, Chain Lightning is still pretty good for AoE. It's going to make Lightning Orbs go into B tier because, like I said, their single target damage is so low. And unless you're building spell speed and you get like a master roll of them, it's hard to see the damage impact of them. Still strong because it's just passive damage and you don't really need to think about it. So we'll be adding it to builds, but not really focusing on it. Next up here, we have Haste. Now, Haste is pretty much the best passive in the game, so we're just going to immediately put that in S tier. Very, very strong. There is a rumor right now that Gem High is going to be made into a legendary ability. And if that is true, then that makes Haste the only speed boost in the game that you can easily obtain. So right now it's S because speed allows you to get shrines while you're running around. It allows you to dodge abilities and allows you to dodge boss dashes and boss projectiles that they shoot out. It's just, speed is just, it's too good. So there's really not much more I need to say about it. It's S, and then if they do go forward with that change and make Gem High into a legendary ability, it's actually like S plus, best ability, up and above, afar away, the best ability in the game. So yes, very, very strong there. Next up here, we have lightning bolts. I love lightning bolts. The only problem with lightning bolts, and the reason I'm going to put it in A tier and not in S tier, the only problem with lightning bolts is its AoE damage is really lacking. It's very, very strong single target damage, so it will help you against the bosses, and it's passive damage too. So it's really great because you know, if you're at low HP, you can dodge around and you can just add a bunch of damage while you're, say, waiting for your life to regain from either lifelink or the inner calm passive from Lady Justice. So while you're dashing around, you can still be doing tons of damage. But like I said, like if you invest into lightning bolts too heavily early, you can find that you can get overwhelmed during some of the waves, like at like 17 minutes and 19 minutes and things like that. Like some of the waves can overwhelm you if you don't have another AoE ability that's letting you kill them easily. So that is why it brings it down, but it's still really, really high damage. So A tier is deserving there. Next up, his dash augment. His dash augment, Ball Lightning, is probably the second best dash in the game, only second to Lifelink. Very, very strong. It actually triples the length of time that you are immortal. Normal dashes make you immortal for about, I think it's like 0.2 or 0.3 seconds. This makes you immortal for 0.6 seconds. It makes you immortal for a very long time, so it's going to go in A tier. It's good. Very, very, very high damage. I almost want to put it in S tier. The only reason why it's not in S tier is because sometimes it can get you in a little sticky situations because you have to run through the mobs in order to do damage with them. So, you know, when you come out of it, you can get into some bad situations because of that. And if you don't have like Lady Justice, and you get into those situations, you start taking extra damage. I've put myself into harm's way a lot with this ability. So it gets an A because it's very high damage, good AoE, good single target, makes you immortal for a long time, but it's very difficult to use, I would say, so it gets an A. And last here we have Brevity, another one of his passives, very, very strong. It's kind of niche, and because it is niche, it's going to get a B ranking for me right now. It breaks some build, it like really, really breaks some builds. But other builds really don't care about it. So if it's like S tier for some builds and then like C tier for other builds, I think B is a fair ranking overall. But just you have to remember that spell speed is just much more significant for some abilities than it is for others. So keep those abilities in mind, and we'll talk about those more as we talk about the different builds. So before I start discussing the specific guides, I just want to kind of describe how we're going to structure this guide video, because Death Must Die is a very heavily RNG based game, so it was difficult for me to write this guide video and really think about how I was going to structure guides for this game, because, you know, ideally for most RPGs you would just have a character build and I would tell you how many points you should invest into each ability. But I realized that for an RNG-based game, with how much RNG is in this game, and there is a lot, you will not have the same build every game. It's just not going to happen. Even if you get the same gods, your builds are going to be vastly different game to game. I don't think I've ever had exactly the same build in a single game yet. It happens. RNG is very strong in this game. You really need to work with what you have. So how I'm going to structure these guide videos and these build videos is I'm going to break it up. Each build I'm going to break up into two sections. Early game, which is when I'm going to say that's like basically level 1 to 10 is early game. And, you know, that's when you're going to want to get your key abilities that lock those abilities in so you can start leveling them. And then a final build, I'm going to discuss a final build, and I'll show you that in a second as we discuss. And then I'm basically just going to each tier of the gods are going to be just a full priority top down, so that the high end, like the upper end of the skills, are going to be the most important ones, and then as you move down, then they'll get less and less important as you move down. And then I'll also list when you want to try to secure a high rarity of a certain ability. Like, for example, here I have expert/master listed for chain lightning, so that shows that you want to try to get a either expert or master. And likewise over here for the divine shield and the inner peace, I have these listed here. You want fair rankings, like at least adept or higher. Over here, I'm also going to discuss which melee blessings you should probably lock in. You want to lock in both the melee blessing and the dash blessing in pretty early, because it saves you. It's almost like a banish in a way. Getting a melee blessing is banishing all the other melee blessings from all the other gods that you have, because you don't see any other melee blessings. And at that point, same for dash blessings. So getting them early actually kind of opens you up into, seeing other abilities more frequently. So you want to lock them in early. So the first guide that I'm going to talk about, the first build, is going to be what I'm calling the Lucky Tank build for Leigong. And this actually, in my opinion, is not only Leigong's strongest build, but I also think it might be one of the strongest builds in the game. Overall, I have probably an 80 or 90% win rate on Darkness 30 with this build. I just win with this build. I don't remember the last time I've lost with it when I've gotten these three gods. Very, very strong. So starting out here, you're going to want to lock in Chain Lightning, like I said, as either expert or master. It's very important that you get expert or master Chain Lightning, because it massively increases the chance to trigger Chain Lightning. So it kind of cascades with the stacking luck, because this is a luck-based build. So it only gets better as you stack luck. Next, you're going to want to lock in your haste ability. Allow you to run around. You want to lock that in early because it allows you to run around and get shrines. It's good for your defense, but mostly you want to lock it in early because you're going to want to get as many shrines as possible, especially because luck shrines are very common. And that it just goes to show you that you probably want to get haste as early as possible. Now, I will note that there's I don't know what it's called. It's like a swan or something shrine that you can kind of gamble and either get, I think it's like plus 10% luck or minus 10% luck. I never take that chance when I'm doing a luck-based build. I don't know if this is just me. I actually skip that shrine because I don't want to risk getting minus luck and gimping my build. So I skip that shrine. But the minor shrine that gives you the plus, I think it's 4.8 or 5%. We'll just call it 5% luck. That's great. And you can get like 4 or 5 of those shrines pretty easy throughout. So just not even having any luck on your build, you could be looking at close to 30% plus luck. Now, for locking in more, you want to lock in more, and obviously you want to get Execution, Soul Stealer, Mayhem. You want to lock those in as early as possible. You want to be stacking your Mayhem, and then, of course, Execution gives you plus experience, so you're going to want to get that as early as possible. And likewise for Lady Justice, because this is a lucky hit-based build, you're going to want to be, in melee range a lot and be attacking. Now, that's not the case for Maris, and I did want to mention, Maris being the ranged class or the ranged character in the game. You could do this build and then switch out Lady Justice for time, with Maris specifically, because she needs less defense. You could do that. I do like Lady Justice in here, though, because Darkness 30 things hit really hard, and I think Lady Justice is a good pick. So starting out with Consecration, you want to get 1 point into Consecration as early as possible. Get that 30% flat DR. Very, very strong. And then Inner Calm or Inner Peace as well, to just, kind of top you off as you're running through. You'll take insequential damage, and you just want to be topped off. You don't want to let Lifelink be your only source of healing. And then Divine Shield. It's always good to get early Divine Shield. Lock it in as high of a rank as you can, but lock it in early because it's going to save you a ton of damage over the course of the run. Your melee blessings that you're going to want to lock in. So I really like Deadly Strike the most for my melee augment in this build, because it just makes your melee hit like a truck. It makes it activate the curse immediately. Your melees do a ton of damage with Deadly Strike. I would put Wrathful Strike as a secondary, and the only reason why Wrathful Strike is in here is because we are scaling luck, so the chance is going to go up to probably like 10 or 20% for the double hit. And then likewise, because all of our triggers are based on hitting, we don't really care about how much damage our melee is doing. We do because it adds damage, but mainly we just want the hit to trigger our abilities. So that's why, as a secondary, I would consider Wrathful in there. But mostly I try to get Deadly. And then for your dash, Lifelink is always there for you. And I would say the choice between these two, Lifelink and Celestial Wings, I'm actually growing on Celestial Wings a lot. Just having that extra movement speed while you're attacking. You're going to want to attack pretty much constantly with this build. So it's adding a lot of movement speed. You notice the difference. So, and the difference here is that, you know, you're only going to want to put 1 point into Celestial Wings, versus Lifelink, you kind of want to max it out just for the extra damage. So since we already have Lady Justice, we have the healing. We don't really need Lifelink for healing. What Lifelink is adding to this build is damage. So you kind of have to ask yourself, do I have enough damage? And if I have enough damage, then maybe Celestial Wings might be better. Like if you instantly roll into a Master Chain Lightning and like you get Soul Steal or Mayhem out of the gate and you're like, wow, my damage is set off. I can go. I'm ready to go. Maybe grab Celestial Wings then, because you want the mobility. You want to get shrines. You want to be able to dodge attacks, because that's your best defense is just not getting hit. So it really helps for that, you know, while you're attacking, especially during bossing. So, but Lifelink, if you're in a situation where maybe you have an Adept Chain Lightning, maybe you can't find Mayhem. Well, you know, if you get a Master Lifelink, and just go roll with it, you know. So that's a choice there, and it really just depends on the rolls that you get, I would say would be the best one. So this is your early game build, and moving on into the late game build. So your late game build is going to look like this. And it's kind of a little bit more busy, but basically I broke it up into abilities that you're going to want to max out, meaning get 5 out of 5, or in haste case, there's only 3 ranks of haste, so maxing it out is just getting the 3 ranks. Mayhem only has one rank, so just there is no priority there. Just get the 1 rank of it. And low priority would it's not priority, it's how many points you're putting into the skill. So low would be like 1 to 2 points, mid would be like 2 to 3 points, high would be like 3 to 4 points, and then maxing out is the 5 points or the 3 points for certain abilities. So you're going to want to max out Chain Lightning, especially if you get like a master rank of it. It will hit like a truck. Lucky, you know, your lucky tank, lucky build, this will be your main damage. Max out Soul Stealers as well, going to be a big part of your damage as well, especially if you get the Deadly Strike. The melees, you can kind of play around with this, but I would just say you'd only want like a point into these. You don't really need to max them out. But if you do get like a large amount of critical strike, you could invest a few more points into them. If you like high roll, like a master rank or something like that, you could put more points. So if you do play Lifelink, again, you want to put some points into it. You know, I had that as high. Whereas if you're going with the Celestial Wings, you can only really need 1 point into that ability. So then haste, you want to max it out for sure. Get the 3 ranks in there. Lightning Bolt is great for just passive damage. So I'm putting that as mid because it's good to grab it at near the end of the game just to add extra damage. One thing I also wanted to mention about the dashes is, you know, I talked about how good Ball Lightning is, but in this specific build, because this is a lucky, you know, attacking-based build, you have to stop attacking when you dash with Ball Lightning. So it's kind of counterintuitive to the play style that you have with this build, because you want to constantly be attacking with this build. So both of these dashes allow you to attack while dashing, and then they just allow you to attack. And especially in the case of the Celestial Wings, it even promotes you attacking, you know, immediately after dashing and things like that. So moving on, your Lightning Orbs, again, just passive damage. So throwing a couple points into Lightning Orbs near the end of the game is good. You only really need 1 point into Execution for the extra experience, so that's fine. Serenity is really strong. Obviously we're a luck-based build, so we're going to want to put a few points into that. Maybe even max it out, but you just want to be careful. And I also wanted to mention this. If you look over at Lady Justice's side, you can see that we're not maxing anything out. And I wanted to mention this because I find that I will get, like, say, like a high roll of protection or a high roll of Celestial Shield, and I will want to max them out because they're master rank, and I like to see the high numbers. But there's something, opportunity cost is very significant in this game because, like I mentioned earlier, you only have a very limited number of levels in this game. So putting points into a skill is taking points away from other skills. You really want your damage abilities to be maxed out. You will be lacking damage unless you have like 200% on Mayhem, which you can't do every game. It's not happening every game. But you will lack damage if you don't max out your damage abilities. So you want to really consider that. So like with Serenity, you're thinking, oh, max it out. You're a luck-based build, you want to max it out. Yes, max it out when you already say that have a maxed out Chain Lightning, already say have a maxed out Soul Stealers, got your Mayhem going, like you want other things to be set up before you max out passives, because they are adding to your damage, but not directly. And like I mentioned with Lady Justice, you can see like we're not maxing out any of Lady Justice's abilities, and that is because if you spend the time to max out her abilities, you will significantly reduce your damage, and you do not want that to be the case. Likewise, you can throw in crows near the end of the game, just because, much like Lightning Bolt and Lightning Orbs, it's just passive damage. It goes really well with Deadly Strike, because the crows will attack, apply curse, and you can hit them, detonate the curse, and then, keep hitting. The crows will keep attacking, and you'll keep detonating the curse over and over again. Very, very strong. So I would add that in kind of, towards the end of the game, or if you just happen to roll it and you want to grab it real quick, 1 point into it or something like that. And then likewise, I mentioned, why we're not maxing these out. You want a few points into Inner Peace. You want a few points into, Divine Shield, few points into Protection, throw a point into Reprisal and Purification towards the end of the game, just to kind of top out your defense near the end of the game. And then for the Fates, Fury is great, obviously, because we're a trigger ability-based hit build, so putting points into Fury is great. You could throw some points into Vigor, it's not bad, but you don't really need it with Lady Justice, so I'd put that really low priority. Critical Strike is good too, again, with Deadly Strike, very, very strong. And then if you are playing Maris with this build, you can put a point or two into Splinter, because just to help you get extra triggers on your abilities. So again, I think this is like one of the strongest builds in the game, and one of the strongest builds Leigong has. Like I said, I don't lose with these gods. Lady Justice is big, Mort is big, obviously, and I think just the Chain Lightning just does so much damage. It's crazy. So next up here for your next build with Leigong, we have something I'm calling the Lightning Summoner build. So the question is, why would you want to build a summoner-based build with Leigong? He has no summons. The reason is brevity, because brevity will massively increase your summon damage. It reduces the cooldown and increases the rate at which the summoner ability increases your damage of your summoned abilities with time. So it's actually possible to get the summoner down to about 30%, 30-second activation. So doubling the overall damage the summoner is giving your summons. So that alone is enough to want to make a Leigong-based summoner build. But then also, the main thing that you're getting with summoner, having summons, is the passive damage, right? So your ability to just kind of dodge around, stay away from all the enemies, and just let your summons kill everything. Well, that is further promoted by Leigong's ability to do passive damage with, say, lightning bolts and lightning orbs, his haste, giving him speed, allowing you to run around more. So there's a lot of reasons why to want a summoner-based Leigong build. So another thing I want to mention is there's going to be a lot of overlap with these builds, and you're always going to want to play what the game gives you and play what you see. So I find myself mixing builds a lot. I find that I'll mix like portions of the summoner build with portions of the lucky hit build and things like that. Like these guides are not meant to be clear lines drawn between specific builds. You will gimp your character if you do that. You really want to mix and match, but I just wanted to kind of put them in a package so you can think, well, what's the ideal version of this build? What's the maximum level I can take this? So in your early game, you're going to, again, grab Leigong+Mort, obviously Mort for Summoner, and then Time for the Summoner. And then the melee blessing you're want to grab is Warped Strike for the increased experience, just one of the best melee abilities in the game. And then the dashes that you'd want to consider are Lifelink and Ball Lightning. Now, the choice between these two, and as you can see, like, Lifelink would be our only source of healing. So that makes me tend to lean more towards Lifelink, so you have a source of healing. However, it's going to be mostly gear dependent. So if you have, like, a lot of armor or you have, like, passive healing built into your build already, you can potentially get away with having Ball Lightning, which is great for a summoner build to just be immortal for that longer period of time while your summons are damaging. But I just wanted to note that here, that in general I would lean towards Lifelink, but if you had a high amount of armor or passive healing into your gear, then Ball Lightning is definitely a good option. You're going to want to grab Brevity again and try to get it at least at Adept or Expert level. Grab it as early as you see it, and then likewise grab Haste. Again, you're going to see this a lot with Mort, grabbing the Execution, Soul Stealer, Mayhem if you see them. Now, it's important to try to roll Mort early and get a summon early, because the only way that you're going to get the summoner on time is if you actually have a point into a summon, which means that you need to grab Soul Stealer, the Ravens, or the Necromancy Skeletons. So you're going to want to put a point into one of those as early as possible. That's why I kind of have Soul Stealers. Like, you want to get a high rarity Soul Stealers if you can, but mainly you want to get the Ravens and the Necromancy Skeletons a high rarity, because the rarity actually increases the speed in which the summons move. And that is very significant, because oftentimes you'll be moving so fast that the summons will be left behind. So it is very important for you to get high speed on your summons and get those as high of rarity as possible. And then likewise, you want to grab the summoner as early as possible. It's important to note that if you start out with an Adept summoner and then increase its rarity to Expert, you will increase all of the previous bonuses that you've got with that increase in rarity. So, you'll get all the time that had ticked this summoner. You'll get all of that damage. So it's very important. It's very important to not be too picky. Like, yeah, you want an Adept, but honestly, if it came up as Novice, I would probably just still grab it anyway and just try to get rarity ups on it. Grab a point into Gem High just because it's amazing, and Wisdom is always good to put a few points into early. Your final endgame summoner build is going to look something like this. You're going to want Brevity to be pretty high, but be careful about this because, again, the opportunity cost that I mentioned with Lady Justice in the last build, you want to be careful you don't invest too much. Now, the difference here is that it does give you damage, but I would say you would not want to put any additional points into Brevity past like minute 15, I would say. You just want to be careful. Make sure that you have enough defense, especially, before you start really, really investing into Brevity a lot. Max out your haste because that's just great. And then it's always good to put points into Lightning Bolt and Lightning Orbs just for more passive damage that goes along with your summons really nicely. You only really need 1 point into Warp Strike, so you can get away with that. If you do have Lifelink, you wanna put some points into there just to increase the healing and increase the damage. And likewise, if you have Ball Lightning, high damage there as well, so want to put some points into that as well. Soul Stealers is something that you could max out, and it is good to max it out, especially if you high roll it into Master or Expert. Really good, but I would say that it is more useful. Like, Soul Stealers will still do a lot of damage, even if you only put 3 ranks into it. It is more useful to put more ranks into the other summons because you get more Ravens, especially in the case of the skeletons, because the skeletons last longer the more points you put into them. Very, very important, especially when you're moving into the Dracula fight, because it's hard for you to maintain skeletons in the Dracula fight. You really need to go into the Dracula fight with a mob of skeletons already, rather than wanting to generate them. So you want to make sure their duration is as long as possible, so they last long enough for you to kill the final boss. Both the Summoner and Gem High only have 1 point into them, so you'll just get the 1 point there. Throw a few points into Wisdom just because it's good. You can take a couple points into Force just to help you with the pull area. I always make sure I put at least 1 point into Time Field because it's so strong against bosses. And likewise, Deadlock is really strong on time and combos excellently with the skeletons, like I mentioned. It increases the length of Gem High and increases the length of skeletons, and the phantoms from Soul Stealers as well increases their duration. So there's a lot that goes off of this ability. So again, you mainly want to throw a few, but not too many points, like 1 or 2, but enough points to, again, make your skeletons last as long as possible. And the Time Field too is great. And then Alteration Ritual, I always try to throw a point into there pretty early, you know, not too early, like not a part of my early game build, but once I get to like level 10 or 15, I want to throw a point into there just so I can get that rolling. And then likewise, because Lifelink is our only real form of healing in this build, you want a few points into Vigor just to increase your maximum health. But the other offerings of the Fates don't really matter because we're not really scaling our attacking in this build. But like I said, you can mix and match builds, and if you happen to roll into a high rank of Chain Lightning and you want to just throw, you know, you grab some Serenity points in Mort and you want to go for a little bit of a luck-based build as well, you can work that in here. But again, this is just kind of an ideal snapshot of what the Summoner build is looking like. So I just wanted to mention that, like, you can throw some other stuff in here and still be really strong. The other thing I wanted to mention is I will settle for a lower rarity of the summons if I do not see them by level 15 or something like that, by like minute 10 or minute 12, because you know, if you get your full setup, like you got your Mayhem, your Brevity, the Summoner going, and you haven't locked in both summons yet for Mort, your damage is going to be severely lacking. So you, like, I say Expert Master here, but know that do settle for an Adept if you can't find the Expert Master. So one of my favorite builds in the game is something I'm calling the Flash Dash build. Originally, I posted about how there were no attack builds. You still attack with this build, but the point is that most of your damage is coming from you moving around and just passively doing damage. And the thing that makes this build so amazing is your ability to get all the shrines and just kill everything while you're running around getting shrines. So that's a big power of this build. So to start out the early game, you are going to melee a little bit. You're going to want to start out with Warp Strike, you know, get your Execution, Soul Stealer, Mayhem combo going just to get your damage boost going, and then likewise get Gem High pretty early. Now, if they do end up changing Gem High to a legendary ability, this is going to be a big hit to the build because Gem High is pretty cornerstone. However, I still think this build will function. It's just going to be weaker with Gem High being a legendary ability. Likewise, you're going to want to grab Force, and you're going to want to put few points into force. Usually I put like 2 or 3 points into force pretty early because, again, you're moving so quickly and you're dashing around so much that you're going to need the pull area for sure. And then grab a few points into wisdom because that's always good. Lightning bolt, you're going to want to get it expert or master. It's worthy to note that the master lightning bolt damage is actually 4 times that of novice because you're getting around double damage, and then it's also triggering twice as often because it almost halves the distance that you need to travel in order for the lightning bolt to trigger. So making sure that you get this master or expert level is cornerstone to this build for sure. And then likewise grab haste too. And then, I'm considering like this the early game trifecta of Mort at this point, the execution, soul stealer, mayhem. It's like the 3 abilities you want to start out with Mort always. And then your dashes that you go, I consider these pretty even, lifelink or ball lightning. Again, lifelink being the only form of healing in this build. So you're going to probably lean more towards that. But if you do have passive healing built into your build, you could get away with ball lightning as well. And ball lightning may be higher AoE damage than lifelink. And considering that we do have the lightning bolt as well, it may be worthwhile to go with the ball lightning if you can get away with it. The other thing I want to mention about this build is it's very gear dependent. This build, it is very augmented by your gear, and it goes much, much higher when you have certain abilities such as like minus 10% cooldown on your dashes, or cool off with the ability to get your just dashes reset, all of them. That's huge. Likewise, there are poison novas and frost novas that you can set off. So for example, if you were going with the ball lightning, you could do a frost nova setup, or if you were going with the lifelink, you could do the poison nova and add a little bit more AoE damage. So this build is heavily augmented by your gear, and I just wanted to mention that. Like, it may seem weak if you don't have those abilities, but like cool off takes this build and sends it to the stars. Your final endgame build of your flash dash is going to look something like this. You're going to want to max out your lightning bolt, max out your haste. You want a high amount in your ball lightning. Your lightning orbs. And really try to get them expert or master, because this adds a lot to your passive AoE damage. Like I said, like the AoE damage of this build can be lacking because the lightning bolt, and then if you go with the life link, you only can hit 5 targets with that. This is only really hitting 1 target. So just be aware of that. And then that kind of puts more of a focus on having a high rank of the lightning orbs because you need that AoE damage. Likewise, this build can kind of dip into a summoner-based build as well, because you do have time, and ravens and necromancy is good for passive damage as well. You can grab some ranks of brevity to make the lightning orbs better, and then likewise, if you dip into a summoner, if you get some ravens, that'd be really good for you to kind of dip into summoner. It's really easy to dip into summoner with this build. The only problem is, I mentioned earlier about the speed of the summons and being how fast you're moving and how fast you're dashing with this build. That can be a serious problem. You leave the summons behind, so it's worth to note that. Like I said earlier, you want a few points into force, a few points into wisdom to get the experience. You want to grab the Alteration Ritual, of course, and then the Time Field, of course. These 2 abilities you always want to put a point into when you have time. And then likewise with your Fates, because Lifelink is our only defensive ability that we have, we want to get some points into Vigor to make sure that we have enough of an HP pool to last throughout the rest of the fight. And then likewise, it's funny because you would never think that this ability on the Fates was good. The sprint ability that increases the length of your dash, but it actually adds damage when you think about Lightning Bolt. It actually adds damage. So, and it's really good, especially if you should decide to go into ball lightning, which of course you're going to, no matter what dash you choose, this is a dash build. No matter what dash you choose, you're going to want to max it out. So it's just kind of funny that in this build, the dash length actually ends up being pretty good. So getting to the end of the builds here, these are not all of the builds that you can build with Leigong, but these are the best builds that I've personally found and had the most success with. So I wanted to note these combinations and these focuses, but there are tons more builds that you can do. But again, these are the ones that I found the most success with. So our penultimate build is going to be the heat sink build, the ability for your computer to expel heat is going to be your combination of Leigong and Summer, grounded by Lady Justice. So early game, we want to grab the Vengeful Strike here. The Vengeful Strike actually has the highest damage in the game of just flat damage that's being added to your melee attack. So very, very strong there. The thing I love about the Heatsink build is it's extremely versatile. Because when you add Leigong and Summer together, they have two distinct ways they can play. They can play like a passive damage game with like Lightning Bolt and Lightning Orbs from Leigong and Meteor and Flare from Summer, and you can play a passive damage game, or you could play a melee trigger game with Chain Lightning and with Flare from Summer. So you can kind of mix and match and kind of go into certain directions depending on what rarity skills you roll. And that's what I really like about this build. So you're going to want to try to get an Expert or Master Chain Lightning again because it's just too strong. You're going to want to try to get an Expert or Master Breath of Fire. Breath of Fire hits very, very hard and has a huge area when you get it Expert or Master. Very strong ability, has a ton of damage. Likewise, you can see I don't necessarily say that you want to make sure that you're getting Lightning Bolt at a high ranking, because the most damage that you're going to do with this build is by melee attacking for sure. So that's what you're going to want to focus on, the Chain Lightning. But it still is an option for you if, like, say you roll a Master Rank Lightning Bolt, a Master Rank Lightning Orb, and then you kind of throw in Brevity and then start with the Meteor Train. You can do a lot of passive damage, so that's just worthy to note. The two dashes that I would consider are Ball Lightning and the Celestial Wings. Again, because this is a melee-based build, you can add Celestial Wings, and it's pretty darn good for your mobility, and I like it a lot. But if you wanted more damage, and like I said, like if you roll a Master Rank Ball Lightning, like grab it. It's going to be insane for your damage. Still want to grab Haste early, like I said, for the Shrines. And then this start for Lady Justice is so good. Grabbing Consecration, grabbing an early Inner Peace at least a depth level, and then grabbing Divine Shield to mitigate all that early damage. And then likewise for Summer, you're going to want to grab Venomance as soon as you can to start increasing the damage of all of your other abilities. And then Flare is just always good. Flare is going to be activating constantly, even when you have no luck built in your build. It's very, very strong. So I always try to grab it early whenever I grab Summer. So your end game for your Heat Sink build is going to look something like this. Maxing out Chain Lightning, maxing out Lightning Bolt, maxing out Haste. And you can see we have more of a focus on Leigong here versus Summer, whereas Summer just gets highs on everything. Because Leigong is overall going to add more damage. Like Lightning Bolt does more damage than Meteor. Chain Lightning does more damage than Breath of Fire. You are still going to want to have a high level of Venomance though, because that's going to massively increase your damage of Chain Lightning. So that's definitely worthy to note there. Your dashes, again, you only want really 1 point into the Celestial Wings. You can dump a lot of points into Ball Lightning if you do roll a high rank of it, so that's definitely worthy to note. Lightning Orbs, not bad to put some points into, have that as mid there. And Brevity can be good. I have it listed as low. If you happen to roll a high ranking of Lightning Orb and a high ranking of Meteor, Brevity then becomes a lot better. So then that's when you want to invest some points into it. Likewise for Lady Justice, you want your few points into Divine Shield because that's always good to reduce that cooldown. Get your Purification to increase your healing. I love the Purification with Consecration. It's just so good. And then Protection, likewise, you want that. And then it's always good to throw 1 point into Reprisal just for the stun. And then likewise, get near max. You can max these out. Like, you can max out Breath of Fire. If you roll a Master Breath of Fire, there's no reason to not max it out. It does hit like a truck when you get it Master. And then likewise, Flare, if you get a Master, no reason to not max this out. But either way, you're still going to want to put a lot of points into it. It's always good to throw 1 point into Incineration, because that fire that's just passively burning everywhere is really good. And then I have Meteor listed as low. But again, if you happen to roll a Master of it and you have the Lightning Orb combo that makes Brevity a lot better, it can be worth investing a little bit more points into it. But overall, you're going to want to focus on your Chain Lightning, your Lightning Bolt, and your Breath of Fire as your main sources of damage. And then likewise for your Fates, you have Fury here because this is an on-hit build, so you're going to want Fury high. And likewise, if you go with the Vengeful Strike, you're going to have high damage on your melee, so Critical Strike is great to invest some points into it. So for the final build, and definitely not the last, but definitely not least, this is one of the stronger builds in the game, in my opinion. I think that Leigong and Krom go wonderfully together, mostly because Krom's best damage ability, by far, is his Chains of War. But the problem with Chains of War is that it only hits in a very small area around you, and you have to kind of get into the mob's face in order for it to do damage. So now that immediately says, okay, I want Lady Justice, because if I'm doing this chainsaw, Chains of War, spinny ball of death, I'm going to be close to the mobs. I need Lady Justice. Now, the problem with this is if you're using Chains of War as a main portion of your damage, then you run into this situation where you have really low damage from range. And there are these archers in the game that have homing missiles. And if you do not kill them, they will overwhelm you and they will one-shot you. It's crazy. Like, they fire out a ton of missiles. They home on you. There could be like 6 or 7 of those archers in play if you do not kill them. So you need range damage. And Leigong is so good at range damage. With his Chain Lightning and his Lightning Bolt, both having an ability like Chain Lightning bouncing to range targets and then Lightning Bolt just doing damage to range targets off screen. Great. So the pair of Leigong and Krom are excellent because they both kind of fill each other's weaknesses. Like, Leigong is kind of afraid to get close because he has a very lack of defense, whereas Krom wants to get in their face, with his knockbacks and everything. And then Leigong's so good at doing damage from range, whereas Krom is really weak at that. So they are a perfect pair. This is an excellent build in my opinion. I've won very many games with Krom Leigong. So for your melee blessing, you want either Merciful Strike. Merciful Strike is actually an amazing damage ability. It adds a lot of damage. And with how much you want to invest in attack speed, because Krom is going to give you attack speed with his Rupture, and then likewise, you do want to grab attack speed on the Fates as early as possible, because all of your damage is going to come from your ability triggers, and since we don't have Mort, there is a version of this build that could use Mort. You could use Mort in place of Lady Justice. However, I wouldn't recommend it, because with how much in their face you need to play, especially against the bosses, you really need Divine Shield in that situation. However, you can play Mort in this build, and it does work. I just think Lady Justice is better. So an alternative, you could run Wrathful Strike, although I prefer Merciful just because it just does way more damage than Wrathful. And we're not scaling luck in this build, but it is an option for you if you would like high roll it or something. And likewise for your dashes, Ball Lightning is excellent. And then the Celestial Wings is there. I really like Celestial Wings a lot for attack-based builds, a lot. So grab your Expert or Master Lightning Bolt. Like I said earlier, a Master level Lightning Bolt is actually 4 times the damage of Novice. Really, really strong. Grab as high ranking of Chain Lightning as you can. It's less important for you to get a high ranking of Chain Lightning, because you'll find once you start to get like 10 Chains of War around you, things will just die as soon as... It's actually hard to melee sometimes. Like, I find, like, it's actually hard for me to maintain my Chains of War because things will just instantly die as soon as they get within melee range of me. So that's why I put less of a focus on the Chain Lightning, because usually your Chains of War is just going to kill everything. And then likewise, you want the haste, get that early to get your shrines. Going with the classic setup of Lady Justice, of Consecration, Inner Peace, Divine Shield, very, very strong there. And then for Krom, you want to get a high ranking of Chains of War. The duration is very important. And then likewise, Shurikens is great to get early to add Rupture to everything. Just make sure everything is ruptured at all times. For your final endgame build, it's going to look something like this. Again, so you want to max out Chains of War. That's going to be your main damage for the Chainsaw, the electric Chainsaw. Max out Chain Lightning and Lightning Bolts. Again, for that range damage. So you got close with the Chains of War, far with the Chain Lightning and Lightning Bolt. Max out your haste just for movement speed. And then you can throw some points into the lightning orbs as well as brevity combos nicely with blades, because it will reduce the cooldown of blades. So if you happen to high roll blades and you want to add blades into your build towards the end of the game, you can add brevity, which will greatly increase the damage of your blades. And likewise, you want Rupture then mid to late game to just send your attack speed through the roof. Purification as well for the increased healing. Protection, always want that. And then Reprisal, again, just standard. If you do roll into Ball Lightning for your dash, you want to put some points into that to increase the damage. And then likewise, the fates matter here a lot. Critical Strike. Like, the thing with Krom, the reason why Critical Strike is higher than other builds in this specific build, because if you do happen to roll legendary abilities with Krom, your melee will hit like a crazy truck. You grab the Merciful Strike, you put some points into that, you get one or two Krom's legendary abilities, throw some Critical Strike in there, you're attacking crazy fast with the Bloodlust and the Fury, and then you're just critting left and right. You're going to see your damage just go crazy, crazy high. So I really like this build. I think this is one of the stronger Leigong builds. And there you have it. Not only my favorite builds for Leigong, but also some of the strongest builds in the game for Leigong. I think Leigong is just one of the highest damaging characters, one of the highest damaging gods in the game. Chain Lightning has a top end damage of 350 base. So you will just see numbers close to 1,000, depending on your, how much you stack Mayhem or Venomance or other abilities that you can stack. You can get a ton of damage from Leigong, plus the movement speed. If they do change Gempai to a legendary ability, Leigong is probably going to be an S tier god at that point, and it may actually move time down a peg. So that's just worthy to note there. If you like this video, please hit that like button. Please hit subscribe for more Death Must Die build videos. I'm going to try to do one of these build videos for each and every god. So if you enjoyed the setup and you enjoyed how I broke down the ability priorities and how you want to put points into all the skills that this game has and kind of structure your build off of that, please hit subscribe and hit that bell for notifications of new videos. And as always, turn your dial to Random Number Gaming for the best build and character guides on the internet.